Welcome. If you like this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It helps spread the word and helps make more of these videos possible. If you like this video even more, you can make a recurring donation via Patreon or a one-time donation via Ko-fi. The links are all in the description below. Enjoy the video. Hello, this is Karia again, and I have another video for you today. Today I'll be doing a review of the Inktense Pan Set, which I got. First of all, I want to thank the patrons over on Patreon for being supporters, because thanks to them I was able to purchase this. I purchased this on Block's website and I paid $24.99, but I think the retail price is $29.99, so I paid fairly close to retail, and right now that's pretty much what they're going for. So let's get started. So as you guys know, Derwent has had the Derwent pencils, which these are the pencils, as well as the Derwent Inktense blocks, and the Inktense, as the name implies, are ink and not watercolor. Ink helps it to layer and glaze a little bit easier than traditional watercolors, as well as being able to produce more vibrancy. Anyway, so this is the container that they come in. So what you get, the packaging, this is what you get by way of swatching of the colors on the packaging. There's no color names listed on the packaging, but I believe if you go to their website, you can either get a set or download a set of the color names. These are the 12 that you get. There is another one here, but I have it out for a reason, and I'll show you guys in a second. These little things, they sort of snap off, so you can hold on, let me see if I can snap these off. These are cute little plastic things that can snap off, and you can sort of rearrange them that way. I found that to be, I mean, it's a cute idea, but it's a little bit more than I need. Anyway, you get a sponge and a little water brush. I really didn't use this very much. I didn't find it to be particularly reliable, especially compared to some of the commercial brushes, but this one is included versus buying your own. Anyway, so these, this is advertised as being, hold on, let me set this aside. This is advertised as being a Inktense Pan Travel Set. Now, they don't say that these are half pans or quarter pans. The wording is very specific, and it's very sort of, I don't know, it doesn't really clarify for you what size pans you get. Obviously these are not full pans, and so that's why we had this set aside here. This is a commercial set of, well, it was a commercial set of 12 half pans, and I took it out and I rearranged it to hold 24 half pans. But a brand new, relatively unused pan I have here. This is a half pan, and even though they're different colors, I'm hoping, and even though this one does have a little bit more use, you can see that this is not a half pan, but it's not quite a quarter pan. I wouldn't quite say this is a quarter pan, but this is between like a half pan and a quarter pan. This is not a full half pan, which is why they don't say that it's a full half pan. This is a little bit less than a full half pan. So so there's that. So this is not a half pan, but it's smaller than a half pan for $24.99, which is, you know, the price. Anyway, I'm gonna pause right here, clean this up, and I'll be right back. There's no pigment numbers or names listed on the box, but if you go to Derwent's website, then you can see the names on the Derwent's website, but the pigment numbers are not yet available. This typically what you see for watercolor anyway, is that they'll make the pigment numbers available so that people can know, you know, sort of what pigments they're mixing. That's typically what you get. Even a lot of student grade lines will make their pigment numbers available. So as of this taping, pigment numbers are not available. I don't know if that's something they plan to do in the future, but if it's not available, then that's something for you to keep in mind. All right, next thing after that is the colors are slightly different than the colors that come in the 12 set of pencils, and I will show you that in a second as well. And the inks do dissolve a little bit. The travel paint sets do dissolve a little bit easier than the than the Inktense blocks. Although you can totally take the Inktense blocks and cut them to size and use them in a packaging like this. This is very reminiscent of the packaging that that some of the other sort of inexpensive watercolors come in. So you can do that, or you can take a watercolor tin like this and put them in a tin like this. Actually, let me show you a size comparison between this and the Derwent Travel Pan Set. So let me set this aside. So you can see this is a commercial size, and you can see that this is a little bit bigger, and in pretty much all dimensions, except they might be around about the same size. Maybe this one's a little bit taller. They might be around about the same size height wise, but overall the dimensions on this are a little bit bigger. However, this does not come with a brush. If you want to put a brush in here, you wouldn't be able to have 24. You would have to either have the original container that they came in, or you would have to just plain have fewer paints in here, rather than having the 24 that I have here. Anyway, so there's that. So if you're curious about the size comparison, however, in terms of mixing area, the mixing area for the Derwent Inktense, because it's bigger, this part of the mixing area is bigger, but you also don't have this flip out side. So overall, it either balances out, or the mixing area might even be a little bit smaller in this. So it's less paint, it's per pan, it's smaller paints, and there's a little bit less mixing area, and the container is bigger. So not necessarily a fault, but this is also potentially more convenient because you have the brush in here. Although if you put a cap on it, then you won't be able to carry it, but the brush is here already, and you have a sponge. However, for me, I feel like there's a certain amount of wasted space. I would have liked to have seen either another row of paints, or the paints themselves be more closer to the traditional size. However, as I said before, these are inks and not paints, so it's not a one-to-one. But if you're thinking about buying one versus the other, then those are things to keep in mind. Or if you're thinking about adding it to your collection, these are the things to keep in mind, instead of making like a DIY version with the blocks. All right, so I'm going to take a break, and then we're going to talk about the next part, which is I'm going to compare the Inktense Pan sets to all the other Inktense products, as well as other products that might be similar or might not be similar, and I will do that in a second. All right, I have this this chart here, which is kind of big, and I don't want it to get too confusing, so I'll sort of break down what I tried to do. The first thing I tried to do is just paint across some of the colors that come in the pan set. I had room for 11 colors, but you get 12 colors. The 12th color is not included here. And I don't necessarily want you to focus too much on the hue and the color indexing, which is not that great, but more on this structure and how they lay down, and how the texture feels. So if you look at the quarter pan set, which is done first, if you look at the quarter pan set, you'll see that they come in pretty smoothly. There's some granulation, but it's not, there's some sort of, I don't know if it's granulation or pigment residue, or much of the same thing. But I will say this about the pan set, is that this is a blue that I think was created for the pan set. It looks like ultramarine or cobalt blue with white added, which is, it is what it is, but it did make some of the mixes that I was doing a little bit more difficult, and I'll show you when I do when I show you guys the paintings. But if you can see the blocks, you can see that the colors are slightly different. Like I said, the color indexing is not that great. These were all supposed to be the same color. These were all supposed to be the same color. These were all supposed to be the same color. And the indexing is not that great. But I will say that the pencils, they give you the closest look in terms of this, because of the graininess with the blocks. Once you try to do the blocks, they aren't as clean as the pan set in terms of dissolving. So the pencils will give you much closer to the pan set. So there's that. And then the other thing I tried to compare them to is the Sennelier watercolors. I've realized these are not watercolors. The Inktense Pan Sets, they are ink, as the name implies. However, I just figured that if it was something that you had in hand and you wanted to sort of see how they compare with watercolors, since it is a sort of a watercolor kind of a put up, we figured we would just see, just for funsies, to see how it goes. And ultimately, you know, the watercolor picks up even easier and even smoother than the Inktense Pan Set. But again, it's not watercolor, although the Sennelier ones do layer really nicely and they glaze really nicely. If you haven't seen the work of Billy Showell, she does amazing watercolor with the Sennelier sets. Anyway, the other thing that I wanted to compare it to is the P.H. Martin's Hydrus ink. And you can kind of see, I mean, they are kind of a little bit far apart, but you can kind of see that they're similar in some ways. This one does sort of, I'm not sure if I went in too many times or something, but this one did have a little bit more texture here, but that's more about the application. But if you want to do just a smooth application on the ink, you totally can. I just wanted to show you like how they compare with inks. I found them to be not quite as vibrant as some of the other ones, and you'll see when I do the comparison chart in more detail. But I just wanted to show you guys, you know, how it looks in comparison to some of the other stuff. I'm gonna show you some of the sketches that I made, and then we're gonna do the swatching. Let's look at the sketches. Now, as I have mentioned on this channel many times, I'm not a professional artist and I don't claim to be. I'm just a person that likes doing reviews. All right, having said that, let me show you, hold on, let me do it this way. All right, I'm gonna show you this one. This one is done with the Inktense Pan Set, and then this one was done with the Sennelier watercolor. You can see that there was a lot of layering here with the Sennelier, and there was a lot of layering here with the Pan Set. For me personally, I had a really hard time getting the kind of gray that I like, and I ended up getting a more sort of muddy color, and there was also more lifting than I was prepared for. I think if I had known that there would be as much lifting between layers as I actually got, I probably would have been a bit more careful. I think I sort of laid them on a little bit too thick, and I put in the next layer a little bit too fast after the first layer was already down. So I was using them very similar to the Sennelier, but I ended up getting more lifting. So in this case, I would really encourage you to wait until it's completely, totally dry before you put in the next layer, because there is a surprising amount of lifting that you can get. Having said that, because these are more opaque than paint, especially the lighter colors, you can layer lighter colors over darker colors. Now the higher level of opacity may or may not be a problem for people who are coming in from watercolor. The other thing is, let me show you the brush set. For this one, I'm not sure why. Maybe it has something to do with the pigment numbers that were used. I had a really hard time getting the colors that I wanted to get with this set, especially with this blue. It was just very hard to get a gray, and I ended up having to mix way too many colors to get a gray. I ended up having to mix both of these plus both of these to get the kind of gray that I wanted. I mean, that's part of the reason why they supply a gray for you, but I, you know, generally like to mix my own gray. Whereas with using the actual paints, it was very easy to get a gray and to layer it over and under, and you know, it was totally easy. So there's that. So the paintings aren't exactly the same, so you can't really go from one to the other the same. I can only share with you like sort of my experience with them. So it's not, you know, they're not necessarily for me because of the way that I work, but I can definitely see why people like them. The vibrancy, especially of this, look at this yellow, is really intense. And we'll see that when we look at the comparison charts. But the vibrancy for some of these colors is really intense. This I I want to say phthalo green light, but that's not really what it's called. It would have been really nice to have color names attached to them and not have to go onto the website, but that's a sort of minor issue. All right. Anyway, all right. Next step is we're going to do the swatching, and we will talk about the colors as we swatch them. All right. So this is labeled as Sun Yellow. And as I mentioned before, none of these colors have pigment numbers listed, but they are all rated as 8 on an 8-point LightFast scale, and they are all rated as vegan. I haven't tested the lightfastness of these colors, so I can't say whether or not that's true. That's just what Derwent says about them. Anyway, so the first color was Sun Yellow. The second color was Mango. Third color is Poppy Red, and you'll notice that these are more cutesy colors that you would see more in crafter type projects. Artists grade watercolor paints will almost always give you a more traditional name. Like this one is called Dark Plum, as well as your pigment makeup, so that you can, work more effectively and do your mixes however you like to do your mixes. This one's called Mid Ultramarine, and honestly this was one of the most unpleasant colors to work with because it really felt like it was like a cobalt or ultramarine or something mixed with white, and that made it really difficult to get some of the tones that I wanted to get, and was part of the problem that I had with my tree. Anyway, so the color after that was, after the ultramarine, was the bright blue. This is the racing green. That's the one that feels like a phthalo green. This next one is a teal green. Looks like the Sennelier phthalo green light. This one here is kiwi, which is interesting. I had to like double check that to make sure that I got it right. And in fact, that this is what they're calling the kiwi. This is the burnt yellow ochre. And the last two are natural brown and ink black. But so there you have it. So they're not giving you more traditional names that sort of let you know what pigments might have been used. That's just something that you're going to have to deal with. That's why I think this is more aimed at people who are not traditional watercolor artists, but who are maybe more ink artists and more Inktense artists and want something to travel with as opposed to being a watercolorist. So what I did here is I just did my regular watercolor mix using the watercolor palette that I showed you. And this is how I typically get the grays that I want to get, is by mixing one of the blues, usually ultramarine or Indian Throne blue, with the burnt umber or burnt sienna. So I think in this case I did ultramarine blue with burnt sienna, and I got all these various fun, interesting, varied shades of gray that I really enjoyed. So it's a different story, however, in terms of me trying to do the same thing with the Inktense Pan Set, because first I had to mix both the blues together to get something that was approximate and more traditional ultramarine, and then to that I added the sort of burnt sienna like color, and it is dark, but it's also not quite the right hue. Anyway, so this is the set that comes in there. This one was supposed to be here. This is the mixture that I made from the, let me move them up close. This is the mixture that I made, the mixture of the gray that I made from the Inktense Pan Set. This is the included gray, and then this is the gray, and you can see all the various tones and the sort of variety of the gray that I can get here. And I actually like this gray much better than either the included gray or the gray that I mixed. Having said that, this is the way that it comes in. Things now I have, this is the mixing chart that I use for my watercolor paints when I do my watercolor reviews. I have a ton of these, so I'm not going to go through all of them. Instead, I've just picked out a handful that I think are similar. Now, the Sennelier, I know some people are going to think that it's unfair with the Sennelier, but the reason that I picked out the Sennelier, this is the set of colors that come in the set that Sennelier picked out, is that the Senneliers do a great job of layering. And if you've seen the work of, you know what, I'm going to get the book and show you. I'll be right. All right, so I got this. This is from the book by Billy Showell, Botanical Painting, and I just want to show you what's possible in terms of creating layers with the Sennelier. Here she shows you some of her techniques with the layering. I know that they say that watercolors can't be layered, but she does a great job of showing you some of the things that she does with her various layers and her various techniques that she uses. But these are all done with the Sennelier watercolor paints, and so I just want to show you guys that so you guys can see what somebody who has, you know, years of experience can do. Part of the reason why I picked the Sennelier, because they're great for layering paints. Now this is their set that they chose, and I did do a video on getting to know your first set of watercolor paints, and you can see that the colors are quite similar that they're chosen, but the Sennelier definitely have a more intense look to them. And these are all Sennelier paints, but these are my set, and you can see the difference in the vibrancy, just night and day in terms of the vibrancy for just the first layer. Now, as you know, as I said, they both layer really well. This is the Sakura Koi, which is a relatively inexpensive watercolor, and in fact I think they may be slightly cheaper than the Inktense, but they are watercolors. And these I didn't really try layering much with these. I do find that other brands of watercolor don't layer as well, and these are some of the most vibrant watercolors that I have. And this is the M-gram watercolors, and you can see the difference just in terms of vibrancy, not just in the mixed colors, but also in the individual colors. You can see the difference. Even this Payne's gray, you know, you can see just the stark difference, the night and day difference. So I know some people would not be happy with that, but I did want to show you guys that in case you are somebody who has watercolor and is thinking about maybe adding this to your collection, and so you can see how these would compare to some of the other sort of water media that you would travel with that is around about the same size. I personally, now it is true that the Sennelier paints, especially if you want to put together a set like this set, which is slightly different than what is in their set of 12, you can see that mine doesn't have Payne's gray or the warm sepia, but instead I add additional blues and another yellow, a darker, warmer yellow. But it is very similar to what they have here. Now, the other thing that I found for me that was an issue with the Derwent Inktense is that you don't really get a cool red. What you get instead is kind of a warmish purple, which doesn't really function the exact same way as a cool red would. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't do what you would normally be able to do, but it does mean that it might be a little bit more challenging to mix up what you want to do, or that your mixes might have to be done a little bit differently to get a similar color. And like I said, a lot of what you're expected to do with these is to do really light layers, but that's the same thing with the Sennelier. And you know, with getting a set of even with their base set of 12, the main thing that you don't get is you don't really get an orange. With the Sennelier base set of 12, you don't really get an orange, and you get what I think is a completely useless warm sepia, which is not a color that I would include. The Payne's gray, though, can be really useful to have, and they also give you one. But again, you can see the difference. The Payne's gray is quite a strong tinting color. So anyway, so there's that. So so what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go ahead and get the actual pan set themselves and just give you guys my conclusion. Music, that's awesome. All right, so I have this now, and so in conclusion, I really personally, I'm not sure that I would necessarily recommend this to people who weren't already huge fans of the Inktense. If you're already a huge fan of the Inktense and you already like the Inktense and you just want to be able to do Inktense on the go, then this is a really good set, and I think that there's a lot of value here in that sense, because as you saw in the chart, it's definitely smoother than taking the blocks and cutting up the blocks. So there's definitely smoother in that sense. So if you are already an Inktense person and you just want to take Inktense with you when you travel, then it's not, then I think this is a really good set. And I think that $25 seems a fair value if that's what you want to be able to do. However, if you are a watercolorist or if you want to get into water-soluble media, I don't think that these are necessarily a good value for everybody, because you're paying $25 and you are again getting less than a half pan. Full 12 half pans, then it's somewhere in the $40 range, $35 to $40 range. And for $35 to $40, there's quite a few brands of watercolor paints that you can get that will get you much more vibrancy than the Inktense. Or if you want to, you want to splurge, you can do something like get the Sennelier set, which is the one that I would recommend if you are looking for something where you want to be glazing over and over again. These aren't as vibrant as the Sennelier isn't as vibrant as something like, the M-gram. Hold on, let me see if I have the M-gram again. It's not, it's not quite as, that's the Sakura Koi. That's the M-gram. So it's not quite as vibrant as the M-gram. You can see that the M-gram gives you a lot more vibrancy on that first layer, but they glaze really amazingly. And as I shown you with the Billy Shaw work, if you are, if you are much more talented artist than I am, then you can glaze and glaze and glaze and create wonderful, wonderful works of art doing that. So I don't think that these are necessarily required for somebody who is already into watercolor and you just want something to travel with. If that's the case, then I would say just pour some paint into some half pans and you can, have a little bit more control. So ultimately, this is really for people who are already huge fans of the Inktense and just want something to go. And I don't think that this is going to convert very many people who aren't already huge fans to the Inktense. I think that probably the pencils would be more of where I would recommend for people to start if you are not already huge fans of the Inktense and you want to try to get into it. If you are a patron, then you can leave comments on the patron page all you like. So so there's that. So thank you guys so much for watching, and if you stayed all the way to the end, I have a special video for you that I have not been able to get yet, and it's a video of both Bella and Stewie. So so there's that. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I really appreciate you guys staying to the end. Don't forget to stay for the video, and don't forget to be kind to one another, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.